I would say I'm no longer with NCAR, first of all, to start with. I'm independent now, currently. Yes, I think I endorse and agree with Mr. Mandal and with Pooja about the need for a platform for extensive, more, greater camaraderie and more franker and longer discussions with the states. I also want to flag a couple of things that Sudipto mentioned, which was, one was about the permanent demand for or a suggestion for a permanent finance commission. In my view, it would not be, as he also disagreed, and I would also strongly argue against such a permanent body. For a couple of reasons. One is that inherently by composition, design and structure, the Finance Commission is weighted and primarily decided by the center, A. And second is that reason that the states in any case have an inherently weak position to start with in terms of their dependency, or even though the process is very extensively consultative and their concerns are taken on board, but they have a resource, they have a financing constraint, which the center does not have, which is that the center can pretty much borrow and resort to deficit financing. It's not that the states can't, they can do so too, but they must take the permission of the center. Usually that permission is always given and it doesn't really, constrain the states, but the fact that it has to be, the permission has to be taken, is by itself a kind of a weakening premise. More than that, I think the most important point is between the center and states fiscal relations and consultation is when the going is good, that means that if there is a cycle is on the upswing, the revenue position is buoyant, things are good, and therefore there's enough money to go around. But the problems arise and the strains arise on the downswing when the cycle is going down, and currently we are facing that, and it's a vicious spiral. It's a vicious spiral because revenues go down. On one hand, there is this, very optimistic promise of 14% nominal growth in GST revenues. Furthermore, both the center and the states are constrained by the fiscal rules, which is the Fiscal Responsibility and Budgetary Management Act, and that binds that the general government debt to GDP ratio has to be brought down to 60% by 25. And on the other hand, the reduction in the case of the states has to come down to 20%. Currently, it's almost 25% of GDP. In the case of the center, it has to come to 40%, and currently it's in the region of around 48% of GDP region. Now, what is happening is that the vicious spiral, growth goes down, revenues go down, and the center has a greater tug in terms of its commitment to the states, but then the states are bound too, because all these assumptions have been made on the basis of nominal GDP growth of 12% of GDP. And I was just looking at the numbers put out by the RBI in its report on state finances on debt sustainability. And already the RBI is projecting 11.5 average for the next 5 years. So the constraint is going to be very, very biting and binding for the states who have already been cutting down capital spending. How do you get out of this trap? The only way to me, it seems, is the FRBM itself ought to be amended, which means that coming back, both center and states coming back to the table.